Hello, so I've just watched the ITV Leaders Debate from Salford. This was basically five party leaders. Can't say the five main parties because the two biggest parties, the Conservatives and Labour, were not present. But basically, it was a political debate leading up to the 2017 UK general election. Um, I miss watching it on TV, so I've had to watch it online. But this is just a few of my thoughts about it. I want to talk about the format, the purpose of the debates, and how that resonates with the public, and also just some thoughts on the leaders. Firstly, there are people questioning what's the point because none of these five people are going to be the next prime minister, and none of them can form a government. I don't entirely agree with that. I don't think it's a case that because Labour and the Conservatives are by far the largest parties, that only they can have a voice. Um, I do believe in proportionality. So, for example, I don't think that the Green Party, for example, should get exactly the same airtime as the Tories or Labour because it's a much smaller party. But by the same token, I don't believe that smaller parties should not have any airtime. Now, according to Julie Etchingham of ITV, both Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn were in fact invited, so it wasn't the case that ITV had excluded them. It sounds like they had excluded themselves. It's well known that Theresa May is keen to avoid debates. Why did Jeremy Corbyn not turn up? I don't know. I guess he is keen to show that he is the leader of Her Majesty's opposition. So I suppose appearing with these other five would just make him look like, rather than the Prime Minister in waiting, I suppose from his perspective, he wants to look like Theresa May's opposite number, and therefore she's not there. His logic is, why should I be there? I suppose that's it. Although I'm a bit surprised he didn't show up, given that he's been making quite a big thing about Theresa May not doing debates. Now, in terms of the format, one thing is notable: there's no representation of Northern Ireland. Being Northern Irish, I feel a bit. I'm not too happy about that. On the other hand, the Northern Irish parties are a lot smaller than most of the parties on the stage. Also, within the system that we have, none of the other parties operate in Northern Ireland. Certainly, the Conservatives, their full name is the Conservative and Unionist Party, but I suppose that would be the reason that the UP, the SDLP, and so on only operate within Northern Ireland, whereas the Liberal Democrats, UKIP, um, and, well, I was going to say on the Green Party, but really they have their own branches within the home nations. So actually, of the five parties represented, it's really only UKIP and the Liberal Democrats that are nationwide. Um, Obviously, the SNP is a Scottish party, and Plaid Cymru is a Welsh party. In terms of the format, I don't know. I find it a little bit messy somehow. I think it's a little bit too. I'm not so sure I like the idea of having only about five questions from very like selected members of an audience. I appreciate that it isn't easy to organise these things. Also, I believe that with the precedent set in 2010, I can't see a situation where we're not going to have televised debates. What I think would be the best thing is probably to have all the main parties that are running in the UK in one debate, and then Jeremy Corbyn versus Theresa May in another debate, because they are the two people most likely to form a government. Um, Definitely, Theresa May shouldn't be getting a coronation, and I think that is going to cost her votes, her attitude to that. It's not that debates change everything, they don't. But now that it is part of our political culture for the third election running, she's going to look like she's out of touch by refusing to take on Jeremy Corbyn face to face. She says, "Well, it happens every Wednesday with Prime Minister's questions." That is not the same thing, and I think she knows that. Um, so, in terms of the format, I'm not so sure I'm a big fan of it. Seems just a little bit. messy somehow. I think it should be more a case of, well, I don't know, honestly. I'm not a huge fan of it, but nor can I particularly suggest an alternative. So I shouldn't be too hard on ITV because it's not easy to organise these things. Now, in terms of the responses tonight, I should start by saying I am not aligned to any political party. I'm not a member of any political party. And quite honestly, I haven't cemented my idea about who I'm going to vote for. I live in a safe Labour seat. Sunderland Central, I should say, will almost certainly go red. It always does. My local MP, I'm relatively happy with. I think she's a decent MP. Um, but within the Labour Party, well, I have my issues with the direction the party is in. But I don't want to make this video too in depth about specific party policies, and I won't. I'll stick with what I saw tonight. Um, a lot of people, like I say, were saying, "Oh well, what's the point of it?" But it is important that both May and Corbyn refused to attend. So I wouldn't criticise ITV too much because they did invite May and Corbyn, and they just didn't turn up. Whether it was perceived that David Cameron and Ed Miliband had a bad experience in 2015, I don't know. In 2015, it did seem to be a case that all the other people were kind of ganging up on David Cameron because he was Prime Minister. So whether May thinks the same thing would happen, I don't know. But basically, you had on stage 5 people who none of them are going to form a government. That's obvious. 2 of them, at least, don't believe in the United Kingdom. They support separatist nationalist parties. Leanne Wood and Nicola Sturgeon. The Greens, well, the more I think about it, the more opposed I am to the Green Party. I've known individual Green people, right? And I've known decent people who are members of the Green Party. But in terms of the party, I think they are the definition of loony left, quite frankly. It's not that I'm opposed to all of their policies. So, sure, climate change is very important, the environment is very important, and the sort of calls they make for a compassionate society, I'm not against that. But their attitude to immigration is basically arrogant. They absolutely refuse to even try to understand people's concerns. And in my opinion, it's just plain reckless. And tonight, Caroline Lucas showed that. Um, she was basically, her and Paul Nuttall were polar opposites in this regard, and I think they're both wrong. Paul Nuttall of UKIP's entire approach was, UKIP supporters are saying they're all ganging up on him. That may be true, but it is true that pretty much every policy area he brought immigration into it. Now, immigration is very important, but reducing immigration isn't going to solve all this country's problems. And I do think it is misleading and divisive to bring immigration into every single policy area. Like, you cut immigration, oh, everything's going to work out. I think that is misleading. But the green policy is the other extreme. It's basically uh, the Greens are not making it clear that they want any sort of controls whatsoever. And the thing is, when they're challenged, and I know this because I've challenged them, they're very defensive and they say, oh, that's not our policy. But they make no attempt whatsoever to accept that you do have to have some controls, you do have to have some regulation. Um, I think that the other parties, and dare I say, even Nicola Sturgeon, at least acknowledged that there are people have concerns about this. And I disagree with Nicola Sturgeon and her party on pretty much everything because they exist for separation. Although I will say this, tonight it was significant that she did not even mention independence. Now I'm starting to think that she has basically conceded that this agenda that the SNP has been pushing for a second independence referendum, it's worn thin now. It's not wanted, it's not needed. Even pro-independent Scots, I think deep down know it isn't going to happen. Um, I've even seen SNP supporters say they don't particularly want another referendum right now. Because what we have in this country, and by this country I mean the UK, we have had 2 divisive referendums, 2 general elections, divisive council elections, London mayoral elections, um, all within a space of 3 years. This country has been bombarded with politics for 3 years. I would say more so than usual, and I think people are honestly getting tired of it, regardless of the political persuasion. I think most people want the dust to settle a bit now, and I think after this general election, certainly there can be debates, but no more referendums or elections for a while, please, because I think it's just causing more and more division in this country. But that's for another video. The Wood, I've no strong views on. I don't think Plaid Cymru is as strong as the SNP. Um, I think basically the Wood, Caroline Lucas, and Nicola Sturgeon have kind of this. I don't want to be accused of sexism and, you know, say the girls' club, but it was the same in 2015. They kind of banded together. Well, in 2015 it was Natalie Bennett, but they seem to pretty much agree on everything, with one or two exceptions. And that indicates to me that they're basically showing they are basically protest parties. Of the three of them, I believe that Nicola Sturgeon is probably the strongest party leader. Um, and, I am 100% opposed to Scottish independence. But I'll give her her due. I think she is quite a tough leader. I think she's probably a good SNP leader for what they stand for. If I was an SNP member or voter, I'd probably be happy with Nicola Sturgeon's performance. But I would say that of all of the five leaders, I feel the strongest performances were two that are diametrically opposed, and that is Paul Nuttall and Tim Farron. Now, UKIP supporters are obviously, one thing I would say about UKIP supporters, they're very defensive and sensitive when it comes to criticism of their leaders, and yet they're the first to get into ad hominem attacks about other leaders. I mean, when UKIP people attack Tim Farron, they're not attacking Liberal Democrat policies, they're attacking his appearance. They come out with these childish insults like he looks like a schoolboy and this sort of thing. What I would say to UKIP people is, if you don't like your leaders being criticised, then at least come up with constructive arguments, not just ad hominem attacks, which frankly I find a lot of UKIP people tend to resort to, and it's a bit pathetic. I think Paul Nuttall was under attack tonight. He was the only right-wing leader there. And I think he handled himself quite well, although he didn't particularly help his case by twice getting the name of one of his opponents wrong. Now, that's just a little bit lazy on his part, and I don't think it came across well. I think Tim Farron got quite a good balance, actually, because the Liberal Democrats, and again, this comes from UKIP people, are very quick to accuse the Lib Dems of being traitors. Well, Tim Farron said he was proud to be British, proud to be patriotic. Now, whether you feel that he is or isn't, the very fact he's willing to say that means he's not being politically correct. And that to me is encouraging. I think Tim Farron is actually quite a good Lib Dem leader overall. Overall. There's areas I am not, I have my questions about the Lib Dems. I've posted questions on their Facebook page. I'm waiting for an answer, particularly on their attitude to regressive cultural practices, because I expect the Liberal Democrats to be on the forefront of condemning, for example, so-called honour killings, Pakistani grooming gangs, this sort of thing. They should be addressing these issues, because if they don't, then of course far-right groups are going to capitalise on that. I feel very strongly about that. I feel liberals need to be standing up for liberal values, which is human rights. So they need to be on the forefront of condemning these problems. They may not be the absolute priority of all policy areas, but the Lib Dems at the moment are being silent about those issues, and I am not happy about that. I do think they are still too politically correct. However, I don't think they're as reckless as the Greens. To get back to the Greens, I've looked at their policies, and I just think they're completely reckless. Caroline Lucas is quite smart. I think she can hold her ground in the debate, but I am really not happy with Green policies. Their attitude to immigration is, I mean, she boasted about being the only party leader who was for free movement of people. Well, that's all very well, but The Greens have done and said nothing to reassure people that they would have any sort of common sense when it comes to immigration. That can only lead to the conclusion that they support unlimited immigration, and if that is not their position, they have not made that clear. Their attitude to crime, I think, is a disgrace. They are explicitly opposed to judicial punishment. Look at their 2015 white paper. That is what they explicitly say. I had a lengthy back and forth debate about this. They support Scottish independence because their sister party in Scotland is pro-independence. So, do you want to put a vote for a party that is not prepared to stand up for the United Kingdom? To me, that is a major issue. They have absolutely no reassurances whatsoever about defence. And I'm not talking about opposing Trident. I think it's possible to oppose nuclear weapons whilst also being robust on defence. The Greens are completely weak on defence. They have no answer whatsoever. In short, I think they're utterly reckless. I think they're just living in cloud cuckoo land, and they're not prepared to branch out and appeal to anyone beyond their own base. So, of the five, it isn't even the SNP I oppose most at the moment. It's probably the Greens, because the SNP, I'm 100% opposed to their agenda for independence, but I think they're finally starting to concede that it isn't going to happen. So, yeah, that's basically my take on it. I've tried to be very honest in this video. I haven't held anything back. I've been opinionated. Um, who am I going to vote for? Well, honestly, I don't know. I honestly don't know, because I find myself in a position where I'm in agreement with certain policy areas from all the parties. Of the big three, I will say this about UKIP though. I don't really see the point of UKIP right now. Paul Nuttall says it's about ensuring that Theresa May doesn't go back on Brexit. Well, her entire rhetoric so far and her statement so far has indicated she is not going to go back on Brexit. I basically see UKIP as the Eurosceptic wing of the Conservative Party, and I think they've done little to show otherwise ever since Nigel Farage stepped down. They've done what they set out to do. Many of their central figures have basically said that. I just don't see the point of them anymore. So that's my take from the ITV Leaders Debate. You can agree with me, disagree with me. One thing I would say, though, is I haven't endorsed any of these parties. So what I don't want people saying is, oh, Nathan, the Lib Dems have done this, the Lib Dems have done that. I'm not outright endorsing the Lib Dems. I have my reservations about the Lib Dems. But I don't think Tim Farron is the caricature that some UKIP people are making him out to be. And I don't think he's actually that left wing when it comes down to it. Obviously, UKIP people are opposed to him because he's pro-EU, and that, UKIP people are a single issue party. EU, EU, EU. It's all they care about. So I'll leave it there, and yeah, let me know your thoughts.